It did change their lives, not in the way they had been told. On October 25, 2017, Ruja Ignatova was scheduled to appear before an audience of OneCoin investors in Lisbon, Portugal. She did not appear. Instead, on that same day, she boarded a Ryanair flight from Sofia, Bulgaria to Athens, Greece. And then she vanished. She has not been seen in public since. The FBI placed her on its 10 most wanted fugitives list in 2022. In June 2024, they increased the reward for information leading to her arrest to $5 million. As of today, she remains on that list. She is 45 years old. She may be alive. She may be dead. Nobody who is authorized to say knows for certain, and the people who might know are not saying. This is the complete story of Ruja Ignatova, the crypto queen. How she built the biggest financial fraud in the history of cryptocurrency. Where the money went. Who she took it from. And what the theories about her current fate actually say about the world she built and the people she built it with. Ruja Ignatova was born in Ruse, Bulgaria, in May 1980. She moved to Germany with her family when she was 10 years old and grew up in the small town of Schramberg in Baden-Württemberg. She was academically exceptional. She completed her undergraduate legal education in Germany and then studied at Oxford, where she earned a master's degree in European law. She went on to complete a doctorate in law at the University of Constance. She then joined the Sofia office of McKinsey & Company, one of the most prestigious management consultancies in the world, as a consultant. On paper, this was the biography of a person who had earned their way into rooms where serious decisions were made. Every credential was real. Every institution was legitimate. The Oxford degree existed. The doctorate existed. The McKinsey employment existed. And this is the specific quality of Ruja Ignatova's early career that made everything that followed possible. She was not presenting a fabricated image of credibility. She had actually built one. The credentials she deployed when she stood on stages around the world and told investors that she had created the future of money were real credentials. The only thing that was not real was the product she was selling. There were early warning signs that, in retrospect, the people who would later give her billions of dollars might have paid more attention to. In 2012, she was convicted of fraud in Germany in connection with a transaction involving a company that had declared bankruptcy under suspicious circumstances. She received a suspended sentence. She did not go to prison. The conviction was not hidden. It existed on the public record. Very few of the investors who later bought OneCoin packages knew about it. In 2013, she was involved with a company called Bitcoin, a multi-level marketing scheme that offered something called educational packages related to cryptocurrency trading. The scheme collapsed. Investors lost money. This too was on the public record. She stood on a stage at Wembley Arena in London and told a crowd of thousands that she was going to make them rich. Not eventually. Not maybe. She was going to make them rich, she said, because she had built something that the financial establishment did not want them to have. A cryptocurrency so powerful, so carefully engineered, so fundamentally superior to Bitcoin that the people who controlled the existing financial system were already afraid of it. She called it the Bitcoin killer. She called it the future of money. She called it OneCoin. The crowd believed her. Of course they did. She was Dr. Ruja Ignatova. She had a PhD in law from a German university. She had studied at Oxford. She had worked at McKinsey. She wore designer gowns and spoke 6 languages and commanded a room with the specific authority of a person who has never had any reason to doubt that the world would listen when she opened her mouth. She was, in the language of the financial world, she was about to detonate. Credible counterparty. She was also running the largest cryptocurrency fraud in history. OneCoin was not a cryptocurrency. It had no blockchain. It could not be mined. Its value was not determined by market forces or any external measure of economic reality. It was determined by Ruja Ignatova personally, on whatever database her team happened to be running that day, updated whenever she decided it was time for the number to go up. When investors logged into their OneCoin accounts and watched their holdings appreciate in value, they were watching a number that a woman in a luxury apartment in Sofia had instructed someone to change. Between 2014 and 2017, using a structure that combined the worst instincts of multi-level marketing with the specific hysteria of the early cryptocurrency boom, OneCoin extracted an estimated $4 billion from investors in more than 175 countries. Farmers in Uganda sold their land to buy OneCoin packages. Families in Pakistan emptied their savings. Pensioners in Germany, the United States, and the United Kingdom handed over retirement funds. People who had never had any money to speak of found themselves persuaded, by the specific combination of social pressure and manufacturer excitement that OneCoin deployed with extraordinary skill, that this was the moment that would change their lives. In 2014, she partnered with a man named Sebastian Greenwood, a Swedish national with his own history of involvement in MLM schemes, and founded OneCoin Ltd., a company incorporated in Bulgaria with offices in Sofia. The pitch they had developed was timed with the precision of people who understood exactly what moment they were operating in. The year 2014 was the moment that Bitcoin had crossed from the obscure world of tech enthusiasts into the mainstream public conversation. The price of Bitcoin had peaked at over $1,000 for the first time in late 2013 and then crashed dramatically. But the idea that ordinary people could make extraordinary money from cryptocurrency had lodged itself in the public imagination in a way that it had never done before. There were millions of people around the world who had heard about Bitcoin, who understood vaguely that people had made money from it, who felt they had missed the first wave, and who were desperately searching for the next one. OneCoin was designed to be the next one. The marketing was built around several specific emotional levers that Ignatova and Greenwood deployed with considerable sophistication. The first was FOMO, the fear of missing out. You missed Bitcoin, they told potential investors. You cannot afford to miss this. The second was exclusivity. OneCoin was not available to anyone who simply wanted to buy it the way you could buy Bitcoin on an exchange. It was available through packages, through the company's educational program, through a network of distributors who had been recruited specifically to sell it to their social circles. The exclusivity was manufactured, but it felt real. The third was social proof. The network structure of OneCoin meant that the person selling you the package was often someone you already knew. A friend, a family member, a colleague. The endorsement came preloaded with trust. And behind all of it was Ruja Ignatova, the woman on the stage in the designer gown, with the Oxford degree and the McKinsey background and the absolute confident authority of someone who knows exactly what they are talking about. She appeared at events across Europe, Asia, and the Americas. She spoke at investor conferences. She gave interviews. She projected the specific combination of intellectual authority and personal charisma that made the people in her audience feel that they were in the presence of someone who had genuinely figured out something important and was generously sharing it with them. What they were actually in the presence of was a very well-constructed performance. OneCoin operated on a centralized SQL database, not a blockchain. A standard commercial database of the kind that any company might use to maintain its records. The coins were not mined through the computational processes that genuine cryptocurrencies use. They were created by the database being updated. When the price of OneCoin increased, as it did consistently and reliably in a way that no real cryptocurrency ever does, this was because Ignatova or her team had instructed the database to show a higher number. The blockchain that OneCoin claimed to have, the technical infrastructure that was supposed to be the foundation of its value and its security, did not exist. Former employees of OneCoin, who later cooperated with investigators, described the internal reality of the organization in terms that make the gap between the public presentation and the private reality almost surreal. The blockchain that was described to investors in glossy presentations and promotional videos was, in the words of one FBI special agent who worked the case, just not there. OneCoin claimed to have a private blockchain. The special agent said this was in contrast to other virtual currencies which have a decentralized and public blockchain. In this case, investors were just asked to trust OneCoin. What they were trusting was a number on a screen that someone else controlled. The money that flowed in was real money. It went into bank accounts controlled by OneCoin and its associated network of companies. From those accounts, it was moved with a speed and a complexity that investigators would spend years trying to map. Shell companies in multiple jurisdictions. Bank accounts in countries with favorable regulatory environments. Real estate purchases in London, Dubai, and elsewhere that converted liquid assets into physical property and made them harder to trace and recover. Luxury apartments in Kensington and other elite London postcodes were acquired through companies registered in Guernsey. A penthouse in a smaller apartment whose liquidation proceeds became the subject of court proceedings in January 2026, when a Guernsey court moved to permanently confiscate the assets at the request of German prosecutors. The network of financial structures built around OneCoin's revenues was not an improvised response to regulatory scrutiny. It had been constructed deliberately and in advance. Ignatova and the people around her were not naive about what they were doing. The complexity of the money flows suggests planning and professional financial advice of a kind that is not available to people who are simply hoping for the best. By 2016, OneCoin was generating revenues on a scale that its own leadership found difficult to manage. Billions of dollars were flowing in from investors across the world. The largest source was China, where the MLM structure had spread with particular efficiency through networks of social contacts, and where the combination of limited financial literacy around cryptocurrency and intense social pressure had proven extraordinarily effective at generating investment. But the money was also coming from Uganda and Pakistan and Germany and the United States and Norway and Brazil and dozens of other countries. Farmers who had sold land, pensioners who had emptied retirement savings, working people who had borrowed money against their homes because someone they trusted had told them this was the opportunity of a lifetime. The moment the exchange shut down was the moment that many investors began to understand, at least dimly, that something was wrong. In 2017, OneCoin shut down the internal exchange where investors could theoretically convert their coins into real currency. The stated reason was maintenance, technical issues that needed to be resolved. The exchange would be back online when the problems were fixed. The maintenance announcement went out. The exchange did not come back. And investors who had been logging in to watch their holdings grow on a screen discovered that the mechanism through which those holdings were supposed to eventually become money had stopped working. By this point, the regulatory and law enforcement apparatus in multiple countries was also moving. The SEC in the United States had issued warnings. Law enforcement agencies in Germany, Italy, China, Bulgaria, and the United Kingdom had opened investigations. The FBI had begun building a case. The net, while still far from closing, was beginning to be visible to anyone inside OneCoin who understood what visibility of that kind meant. On October 25, 2017, Ruja Ignatova was supposed to be on a stage in Lisbon. She was not. She was at Sofia Airport, boarding a Ryanair flight to Athens. She has not appeared publicly since that day. What happened in the aftermath of her disappearance unfolded slowly, and then all at once. Her brother Konstantin Ignatov was brought in to manage the organization in her absence. He was the public face of OneCoin from 2017 onward, traveling internationally, speaking at investor events, attempting to maintain the fiction that the operation was legitimate and that his sister's absence was temporary. In March 2019, he was arrested by the FBI at Los Angeles International Airport as he stepped off a flight. He was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. Facing the full weight of the federal criminal justice system, and with significant evidence against him, he cooperated. He pleaded guilty. He provided extensive testimony about the inner workings of OneCoin and about his sister's role in its operation. His sentencing has been repeatedly delayed as his cooperation with prosecutors continues. Sebastian Greenwood was arrested in Thailand in 2018. He was extradited to the United States and charged with multiple counts of fraud and money laundering. His case has been working through the federal court system. The scale of who lost money and how much they lost has emerged gradually through the legal proceedings and through the investigative journalism that followed the case. The BBC podcast The Missing Cryptoqueen, produced by journalist Jamie Bartlett and launching in 2019, introduced the story to a mainstream audience that had not been following it and drove significant public attention to the case. Bartlett later wrote a book under the same title. The BBC podcast became one of the most listened to true crime and financial crime documentaries in the platform's history. The $4 billion figure that investigators have attached to the total losses represents money that came from real people making real decisions in real circumstances. The farmers in Uganda who sold land to buy OneCoin packages did not recover that land. The pensioners in Germany who put their savings into OneCoin did not recover those savings. The families in Pakistan and China and Norway and the United States who believed that Ruja Ignatova had built them a path to financial security discovered instead that what she had built was a path to her own financial security, constructed from their money. And then there is the question of what happened to her. There are several theories about Ruja Ignatova's current whereabouts and status, and they range from the mundane to the deeply disturbing. The first and most straightforward is that she is alive and in hiding, moving between countries with diplomatic protection or purchased anonymity, living on the proceeds of the fraud in the way that a sufficiently wealthy fugitive can live. The FBI's working assumption, stated publicly by special agents as recently as 2022, is that she is alive. The Bureau operates under this assumption because it has no evidence to the contrary and because assuming a living fugitive is still alive is the operationally correct posture. The theory that she is in Dubai has circulated for years and has some basis in her known connections to the UAE. She is linked to luxury properties in Dubai. The UAE's extradition relationships with Western countries are complicated in ways that would make extracting a fugitive there difficult, particularly one with the resources to hire significant legal protection. The theory that she is dead is more disturbing and has more specific evidentiary grounding than most people who follow the case casually realize. In 2023, the Bulgarian investigative journalism outlet Bird published a report based on Bulgarian police documents. The documents described a police informant who had overheard a man connected to a Bulgarian organized crime figure, a drug lord known as Taki, stating in an intoxicated conversation that Ignatova had been murdered in November 2018 on Taki's orders. According to the account, she was killed aboard a yacht in the Ionian Sea, and her body was dismembered and thrown overboard. The alleged motive was to conceal the criminal organization's involvement in OneCoin and to prevent Ignatova from being arrested and providing testimony about her financial relationships with Bulgarian organized crime. This account has not been confirmed. The alleged murderer named in the Bird report is a Bulgarian national who is serving a sentence in the Netherlands for drug trafficking and has not been charged with anything connected to Ignatova. The alleged organizer, the man known as Taki, is dead. The informant's testimony was conveyed at second-hand in documents that Bulgarian police have not publicly authenticated. What the Bird report makes clear, regardless of its specific accuracy, is the nature of the world that OneCoin's money had moved through. Billion-dollar financial frauds do not operate in a vacuum. They require infrastructure, banking relationships, legal advice, security, and in parts of Eastern Europe and the former Soviet sphere, the provision of that infrastructure for large-scale financial crime has historically involved connections to organized criminal networks in ways that created obligations and dependencies that did not simply end when the fraud became publicly known. Whether Ruja Ignatova is alive in a luxury apartment somewhere, or dead at the bottom of the Ionian Sea, or something else entirely that the available record does not account for, the money she took from the people who trusted her has not been fully recovered and most of it never will be. Asset forfeiture proceedings in Guernsey, Germany, and elsewhere have identified and begun the process of confiscating specific properties and accounts. The total amount recovered represents a small fraction of the $4 billion that flowed through OneCoin's accounts between 2014 and 2017. The FBI's reward is $5 million. The contact channels are publicly available. Tips come in regularly, apparently, including reported sightings as recently as 2025 in South Africa. None of them have produced an arrest. She is 45 years old. If she is alive, she has been in hiding for nearly 9 years. She has a daughter whose current whereabouts are protected. She has a husband, a German lawyer named Bjorn Strel. She has a mother and extended family in Bulgaria. Whether any of those connections have provided any information to investigators is something that the public record does not reveal. What the public record reveals is this: a woman who was genuinely educated, genuinely intelligent, and genuinely capable of building something real chose instead to build the largest cryptocurrency fraud in history. She built it from the specific conditions of a moment when millions of people wanted desperately to believe that a smarter version of themselves, someone with the right credentials and the right confidence and the right command of the stage, had figured out the thing that everyone else had missed. She was very good at being that person. Good enough to take $4 billion from people on 6 continents. Good enough to disappear before the handcuffs could close. Good enough to remain 9 years later, either alive and hiding or dead in the Ionian Sea, while the FBI maintains a $5 million reward and her brother's sentencing keeps getting delayed because his cooperation is still apparently producing information worth having. The people who bought OneCoin packages are still waiting. Not for the money, most of them. That hope has been gone for years for most of them. They are waiting for the answer to a question that the FBI and Europol and the Bulgarian authorities and the courts in Guernsey and Germany have not been able to provide. Where is she? That question has a $5 million reward attached to it. If you know the answer, the FBI would very much like to hear from you. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think happened to Ruja Ignatova. Tell me whether you think she is alive. Tell me what part of this story you find hardest to believe despite the fact that it is completely true. Because this is one of those cases where the truth is more extraordinary than any version of events you could invent. $4 billion. 175 countries. A Ryanair flight to Athens. And then nothing. Subscribe right now so you are here when this case breaks. Because it will break eventually. Cases like this always do.